Hi, my name is Richard Crawford, host of Supply and Demand, an enlightening webcast show where we delve into the dynamic world of the global supply chain and where we navigate through the complexities, disruptions, and innovations that shape this vital network of interconnected businesses. From sourcing raw materials to delivering finished products, we'll uncover the challenges that arise at each stage and explore the strategies for optimizing efficiency and sustainability. And each week we'll highlight and discuss a specific supply chain topic. And of course, I'm joined each week by my co-host, CEO of the Atlas Network and author of Supply Chain's Ups and Downs, Mr. Kareem Kafuri.
Richard Crawford, how are you, my friend? Good
How
to
you
see
doing, buddy? I feel like, again, every time we do this, I feel like I haven't talked to you forever.
I know. We need to do this a lot more frequently than we do it. And we need to see each other a little bit more frequently than we have. That's the other part.
Well, obviously, you've been on vacation. Look at you, that golden glow. Like, you know, we haven't all been sitting on a beach, Kareem.
Yeah. Well, you know, I do a lot of work in the spirits and beverage industry, and that takes me to some pretty cool places now and again. And you know, we were in Bermuda recently, which I had never been to before.
Oh, wow.
And from New York, it was an hour and a half. It was a super quick flight. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, the style was so amazing. You know, you got these folks walking around because it's a British, you know, territory in the shorts with the long socks and the dress shoes, that sort of Bermuda shorts. I had the Bermudian sandwich, which is a fish sandwich with coleslaw, tomatoes, lettuce on raisin bread. The idea of raisin bread and a fish sandwich don't seem to make sense, but in Bermuda, somehow they make sense. And it was an amazing time. Bermuda was so cool and really enjoyed it. The weather was up and down like crazy. As I was landing in the plane, all the electronics in the plane started going haywire.
Yeah, because you're in the Bermuda Triangle.
You're going into some magnetic field.
That's why I didn't hear from you for like 4 weeks.
Right. I was going to say, I thought I was going to end up in like 1952, like next to like some destroyer that got like abandoned in the time
Midway,
warp.
end up at Midway.
Yeah, it's something totally weird. But what was really neat about the whole trip down there, and it is indicative of anything that you do in the islands when it comes to supply chain, and I've encountered this many, many times because we have a lot of groups in the Caribbean, is it's all about the people. If you don't have trust and you don't build that face-to-face relationship, there is no supply chain business down there.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty endearing and a bit old school. You go down there, you sit, you break bread, you meet with each other, you have good conversation. And in the end, it's sort of the supply chain of the Caribbean or the island-based supply chain, whatever you want to call it. It's all about that. But if you nail that, if you do that good relationship, they're with you for years, they rely upon you, you really are an important part of their lives and their business. And down there in the Caribbean, you know, there's all these cash crops. When you're in a place like St. Lucia, it's all about the bananas and the cocoa and the coconut and things of that nature. And in Bermuda, they obviously have different kinds of agricultural cash crops too, and really just a unique style about that island, which I found very, very fascinating. Right. And so I really enjoyed it. And you know,
you're right about the trust, because it's not like a small island culture. It's not like a large community. I mean, a large country where if you don't come into one port, you can come into the other, like, or you have a choice on where your goods come into the country. I mean, with island life, it comes in at one place, and it's usually probably one, maybe two transport businesses from there that can get your product to where it needs to go.
Correct. And when you are a good source for them and a dependable source, regardless of what you're doing or what service you're providing, they're like, all right, you know, you're our people for the next 15, 20 years, however long it's going to be. Yeah. And so I really find that to be extremely endearing. And I had a great opportunity to meet some great new business folks. We got along real well. I think there's going to be some real opportunities coming out of Bermuda for the Atlas Network, and hopefully ways that we can really help them with their needs too.
How many pina coladas did you have?
Well, I went down there, and the first one they gave me was a handshaken one.
Right.
And I really was not that impressed.
Right.
Then I went to another bar and they had me have the frozen one. And the frozen one was infinitely better. But having a good drink is a critical and important part of obviously being in the islands.
Right.
I think that segues very well into our show today, right?
That segues perfectly well. So I'm pretty excited today because in the podcast, we're joined today by Mark Pinho, CEO, and Alex Joerger, Chief Merchandising Officer from Wine.com, the world's largest wine retailer, and they both bring a deep industry knowledge and passion for making great wine more accessible to everybody. A very warm welcome to you both. I guess, where is Alex? Have we lost him? He's joining. We'll get him here eventually. So Mark, a very warm welcome, mate.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you guys having us on.
Now, there's Alex. Hey, buddy.
Hey.
So just before we move ahead, our last podcast episode, we had a very interesting good friend of mine, gentleman on, who's a master distiller of Scotch whiskey at the Glenmorangie Company. And I made the mistake of, during that podcast, not having a glass of whiskey. So today I wasn't going to make the same mistake. So today I have myself a nice glass of wine for this podcast.
Well, I don't have a glass, but I got a bottle. Does that count?
You just need a straw now.
I'm supportive. That's Portuguese too, so I'm all for it.
Wow,
that's
look
right.
at that.
We got a 1985 vintage Porto right there, grams.
Yeah,
Love it.
He showed his skill level there, his knowledge. Boom, saw the back
just
of the
from
bottle.
back of the label.
Yeah, I guess. So guys, again, a warm welcome. Mark, you're the CEO. Alex, you're the Chief Merchandising Officer. Just give us a quick, Mark, you go first. Just give us a quick background on what your day looks like.
Yeah, so look, we're obviously e-commerce focused, so 100% of what we do is online. So, really the two big functions we have are, Alex owns the portion of our business dealing with the supply chain, which is huge for us given just the number of relationships and things of that nature. And then a lot of what I spend my time on doing is directing kind of the marketing technology efforts, where we're working with the customers to figure out what is it they're looking for, what can we be providing them for. And then honestly, the big thing in our industry is, how do you get people to try new things? Because again, we'll all fall into the trap of there's one or two things what we'll go back to. But with the ubiquity and the diversity of kind of what's out there, the fun part about, if you enjoy wine is trying different things and seeing what you like and don't like. And so that's one of the things that we have a huge advantage over, is being able to touch a lot of different people, see what they like, and then offer them a lot of different options, which is different than your kind of, your local bottle shop maybe has the ability to do.
Right. And Alex, for you sounds like, Alex, you do the real work.
Right.
No, not at all. I mean, we're working with the supply chain and partners, in the U.S. and all over the world, just to bring the wines onto the site, and then, the marketing team and Mark's focus on connecting those wines, those brands with customers, and expanding that reach. Right. That's really the name of the game. We're kind of a marketing company that happens to sell wine. Just that's what we love. But we really want to continue to take people on that journey and that discovery. So yeah, I mean, we're working with 400 or so different wholesalers in the U.S. Through the what's called the 3-tier system. It's a pretty regulated industry, and I think that's something we'll probably talk about a little bit more. But then we also do some of our own direct importing mostly from Europe, but starting to scratch into Southern Hemisphere as well. So cool. It's a complex network out there for sure.
So I would say something real quick. I mean, what's a common thread with this call and the other couple of shows we've done recently is kind of the agricultural side of supply chain, and how critical and how important that is. We're in supply chain, we're always trying to work through these controllable and these uncontrollable factors. I mean, we had a group, a cigar group that was on a little bit ago. We had a Scotch group that was on a little bit ago. And then obviously you all representing the wine industry.
Yeah.
Bad crop got big problems, right? I mean, acts of God, nature, Mother Nature has different plans, some kind of a disease or a pestilence that may, destroy a crop or a vintage or otherwise. And then I would assume even just trying to protect those assets by making sure that they're appropriately stored and or refrigerated, whatever it may be. So like, I find this to be fascinating, a fascinating part of this part of the supply chain when we're talking with, consumables and agricultural based products. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great point, and it was definitely on my hit list, is kind of to remind people that wine is an agricultural product. It's grown on vines. There's real farmers out there. It's not a commodity in a factory, for the most part. So the fact that you've had scotch and cigars, similarly, and now we're doing wine. I mean, I think you're right on the same path. Cat food, maybe that's the next segment. That is not an agricultural product. So
right, correct.
You can handle that one, a lot more controllables there. But yeah, for us, absolutely. Mostly, it's affecting supply, availability, and then also, of course, price. And we see that driven when entire regions are hit with frost or yields are down significantly. Then yeah, that's definitely going to impact allocations. How much is available to us, because they want to keep their placements throughout their universe of retailers and restaurants that are selling the wine. And then it becomes a little bit of a relationship game, right? Where we want to steal share from others to keep our business, keep our customers happy, particularly on some of the higher end stuff that tends to be more affected. A lot of the grocery store level wines that are, maybe a little bit more of a commodity, I think they're less impacted by some of these fluctuations, and the growing conditions, if you will, or those producers have just so much scale that they can mitigate some of those problems by sourcing differently, and sort of either keeping their supply where it needs to be, or also not bringing those price changes to the market. But for us, we see it up and down, and we're not really much of a player in those commodity wines anyway. So we are exposed to it, but also I think we have good tools in place to manage through it.
Does it ever work to your advantage? Is it ever a scenario where it's like, we only got 5 bottles, and so each bottle costs $1,000 now because we got 5 bottles, and there's maybe an additional some level of a margin there or something because you've been able to secure the scarce commodity? Is that ever positive in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that scarcity factor with our customers that are really attached to a certain wine or brand, or it got some killer score, and we can pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what, just wrap it all up, we'll take it all. Mm-hmm. And then that gives us that pricing power, as well as just that's a good sort of relationship builder with our customers to kind of solidify our position as not only are we, convenient, it's shipping, it's getting it into your house, like super ease of purchase, no friction, but also like we have access to really incredible stuff too. And we want to continue to push that and really make that case to the right person. If you don't care about that Graham's 85 year, I don't want to blast you about it, right? Like I want to find the right person that's gonna care about it.
Right. It reminds me of like Blanton's. I like to drink bourbon, and I remember 10 plus years ago, you could get a bottle for $60 or $70. But then, brown liquor became super popular, and they had only aged so much in those rack houses. So then in the end, now it's $200 some a bottle if you can get it. And every probably 6 months, my local liquor store will call me up and say, we got a bottle coming in. You want it? And I can just see how, again, that's a logistical challenge in a different industry, but I can see how those things flow through also.
And Kareem, the other thing I think is important in our industry, and this is what makes wine so fascinating versus even, spirits or cigars, year to year, the product changes.
Yeah. Right.
So let's say I like Mouton Rothschild, right? The 2024 that just came out is going to be very different than the 23 versus the 22 versus the 21. Yep. Mm-hmm. They're all going to rhyme. It comes from the same place. The makers, for the most part, are going to be the same. But the other thing that happens in different vintages is, and we're using technology to help do this, is, maybe people will look at me and be like, Mark, you like heavier wines, so these are actually be the vintages you like. So, this is a tougher vintage, but guess what? You don't want to buy these anyway because it's not your flavor profile, it's not your wine profile. And there are substitutions around that we can make. So the other thing that's important with agriculture, and having lived in that world for many years, if you only own one property, then what happens for a given year in climate matters a lot. On our side, what we do is we make sure that, hey, if there's an affected year, like when we had the wildfires in California, that was a really affected vintage. Our job as merchants was to say, hey, this year, tougher year for California, not as much quantity available, but here's the type of things, if you like this, that we can find you substitutions, because there's wonderful wines from all over the place. And so what we can do is help consumers, figure out, they're like, here's something I also like. And, if the 2020s aren't available to me or the 2021s aren't available to me, I'm going to go try this for either other part of the world, or I'll try a different vintage that maybe is more akin. So for us, the complexity of the supply chain is interesting, because on the consumer side, it creates this massive opportunity for experimentation and giving folks different ways to try either new experiences or replicate experiences in a similar way.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you juggle? Look, there's 50 states in the United States, and there's 50 state regulations, all completely different when it comes to, especially when it comes to spirits. I'm not sure wine faces the same, I may be wrong, but faces the same stipulations. But how do you juggle that? And who are you guys using for that last mile? Who's taking your product when they order it online? Who's taking it to their doorstep?
Yeah, no, great. First of all, absolutely, the regulations are the same or equally complex for spirit wine. Beer kind of operates a little bit differently, and we're not in the beer business, but we do sell spirits, mostly wine. Yep. So we have 6 logistics centers where we purchase wine in the U.S. as a licensed retailer. So I think that's really important to call out here for any viewers that are sort of interested in the space or know about the space. Like we are a licensed retailer in those 6 markets, and we buy from wholesalers, or like I mentioned, we do a little of our own direct importing too. So very compliant. And then from there, through a sort of patchwork quilt of regulations and knowing the state laws, we ship to 43 states in the District of Columbia. So there's certain places where you just can't ship to at all. Utah, probably not a shocker. Mississippi, some of those, but we have a tremendous amount of coverage through those 6 locations. 93% of the drinkers in the United States can buy wine from us. So
I have a follow-up question to that. Have you guys, and I asked this because Kareem and I attended an expo recently, supply chain logistics expo, and it was last mile being delivered, where things were delivered by drone. Have any of your bottles, any of them at all, been delivered by drone?
Not yet. I think
not that we know about.
Right. Okay. I'm in Virginia, and I believe they're legally can do drone deliveries here, whether it's Amazon or whatever. So I just want to go order something so I can watch that drone drop it in my yard.
I love the fact of what Mark said, because it was very, very critical in the realm of supply chain, which is opportunity through chaos, because that happens all the time. So I just got back from Cleveland, where I was doing a keynote speech on tariffs. Tariff mitigation, obviously it's a big deal. Everybody wants to know how to manage this and work within this. And I was giving, 5 ways to do this, 2 strategic, 3 operational. And the point that I kept sort of driving here is this is bad, but at the same time, it's an amazing opportunity if you want to grasp it as such. Right. And those opportunities could be rebranding, remarketing, repositioning, cost engineering, alternative supply chains. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can look at it, because sometimes we get so caught up in what we know, as you said before, to go back to your wine example, that you're unwilling to go into places that are unknown. And you need that disruption to say, hey, we got problems in California. Now you need to be looking at Chile, or you need to be looking at France again, because that's something that's comparable but more affordable, or something that's a little bit more forward than what you're used to. So, I love those situations in the supply chain that are disruptive, because they create new pathways and new opportunities. That's what I write about a lot in my book over here, that I talk about supply chain ups and downs, about that you have to take advantage of those opportunities that come through the chaos in the supply chain. I could totally see how you do that. And you're probably like, hey, you know what? It's about time that we can do something different in California. It's good to kind of shift the gears, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mark mentioned the wildfire scenario in the 2020 vintage. That caused a lot of producers, one, to not make wine, and then they raised the price on the wine they did have available, either the back of the 19s or the 21s that were coming around. And, in order to slow down the demand, is what they told us. Well, congratulations, Napa. You now have forced a lot, or not forced, but you've opened the door to a lot of your drinkers to go find Tuscany and Bordeaux.
Correct.
And, they might not come back, so
Right.
that shift was really sort of precipitated by that move, as much as we tried to counsel against it. And now, sure enough, 3-4 years later, they're starting to correct their prices back down. Because those drinkers haven't run back now that the wine is available, but it's 30% more expensive than what they're used to. So you're absolutely right there, Kareem.
All right, guys. So now we're going to have the real fun section of the show. We'll do the hot seat. And we're going to ask you 3 questions. I think we'll ask you first, Alex, and then we'll go from there. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Fire away.
Let me get the stop clock going. And all right. Question number 1. What are the biggest supply chain challenges Wine.com faces managing such a diverse and geographically dispersed product like wine?
I definitely think, we've got a lot of wholesaler relationships to manage. And, they have their own balance sheet and they have their own, pricing to pass through. So I think the complexity of that network of 400 wholesalers, even for just our 6 logistics centers, right? There's a lot of call points, there's a lot of touch points that, need to ultimately have some level of alignment in order to put a consistent product out there for the customers. Because, you can't just explain to people, why does this cost so much in New York and differently in California? As I said, wine has this fractured supply chain network. It's not like you buy a pillow and it's the same place at every crate and barrel you walk into, right? Yeah. We don't have the ability to do that easily. And so the team is really managing through those relationships from a supplier level down to the wholesaler to have some sort of alignment. So, and it also relates to in-stocks, not just pricing, but do you even have the inventory? Why didn't you bring it in? Why didn't you bring in enough? That kind of stuff is a day-to-day.
All right, here's question number 2. How does Wine.com ensure compliance with complex and varying alcohol shipping laws across the states while maintaining customer satisfaction?
So Kareem, I'll handle that. And I think you hit on it before thematically, which is complexity can actually be an asset, especially when you're using technology, right? So, if you're a chain store, trying to work in all these jurisdictions, it becomes more difficult because you'd have to just open in the jurisdiction and manage to it. One of the advantages we have that we manage through technology is, by basically taking the existing regulatory framework and we built our network around that to basically maximize the number of people we could reach, the options that we can provide those folks, and like the delivery schedule that makes it most flexible for everybody. So for us, we know when a customer is showing up and they need something shipped to a state, they tell us that up front, and then we tell them what their options are. And generally speaking, what we can do is, depending on what state they're in, we can give them a couple of different options and optimize pricing or optimize speed depending on what they're looking to do. So for us, we start with the concept of we're going to be compliant with every transaction based on where it's coming from. And then we build up to optimize what the consumer experience is going to be on top of that. And then I think Alex hit on the biggest point. The one thing that we can't explain to folks is that, hey, pricing's different market to market because we don't get to set pricing. That's a regulated aspect of the business. But what we can tell you is if you're looking for product X, maybe we're shipping it to you from Texas where we get the best price, as opposed to shipping it to you from California, even though it might be a product that's in California. So for us, we get the ability at our size and our reach to be able to optimize against that to give the customer the best experience. But we actually kind of like the regulatory framework because it gives us an advantage given the size and the breadth of the operation we have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question. You've got about 1 minute and 45 seconds. What role does technology play in optimizing your inventory and logistics to meet demand fluctuations, especially during peak seasons?
So maybe I'll start, Alex, and then I'll kick it to you because he's the important part of this. But on the front end, for us, we actually use the technology to figure out what velocity are things selling at, where do we see things happening. And as one of the only data providers or data collectors in the industry that has this, by label, by bottle, and across a bunch of different geographical locations, we're able to figure out what has momentum in the market and how do we get more of it. But at the end of the day, when it comes to peak season, I'll let Alex jump into this, but you just have to be a good merchandiser. You have to be out there figuring this stuff out. And maybe Alex, you want to take what happens, end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, I think there's certainly room for technology and our data to be leveraged to a greater degree. But at the end of the day, you're still managing pretty fast moving volatile inventory levels at your wholesalers, because nobody wants to go out over their skis on stuff. So we're trying to be as just in time as possible during an incredibly compressed sales period where, we're getting deliveries every day, but there still is going to be downtime if that inventory, that pallet's not getting checked in, or, by the time we're getting one pallet, it could already be sold and we're ordering another one for tomorrow, so that the teams are really trying to stay on top of that, using the forecasting tools, but then also adjusting on the fly to the trends that we're seeing, as orders are getting placed, as the marketing team's pushing out a promotion, and staying on top of that. So it's a little bit of that, frenzied period right at the end of the year, which we all kind of thrive on.
And at the end of the day, you're going to sell out of the expensive champagne, so you better have enough of it.
All right, guys, that was pretty good. You're at 5:09. 5 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, you would have been 5:01, but you added that little sentence at the end there, Mark. So, but it was a good
we're about to negotiate some champagne contracts, so I know.
Of course, it was a nice little wrap up. So
well, you got. Don't forget, you got something very important to ask.
No, I was about to say, we ask you those questions, but we actually do have one more question for both of you. And we call this section the last drop. Hey, if you could have a coffee with anybody in the world, alive or dead, who would it be and why? But obviously today, if you could have a glass of wine, or let's call it a case. If you could have a case of wine with anybody, live or dead, now in the history of the world, who would it be and why? And we'll ask you first, Mark.
Oh, this is a good one. So the glass of wine I would love to have was probably my grandfather. He was a little bit of a Renaissance man, but he passed away when I was young. And the older I get, I appreciate folks like him who lived through a lot of different things, but he was kind of like this polymath that was good at many things. And I feel like my adult version would have really enjoyed spending time with him. So I'm gonna go with Grandpa.
That's a good one. I don't think we've had that one yet.
Nope.
No. Alex?
I'm gonna say I'll keep it within the in the industry here and go with a female winemaker from Burgundy, really tremendous wines, who passed away at a relatively early age, Anne-Claude Lefebvre, who just still to this day has just these iconic wines for me. And Mark knows I'm a proper Chardonnay guy. I do love my white Burgundies. And I would just love to spend some time with her, in the vineyard and share some bottles from, really kind of a super special place.
Awesome. You're a wine geek.
He works for wine.com.
No, but still, he's, I think if he wasn't working for wine.com, he'd still be like a wine geek.
I don't know about that, but you're at an elevated level when
that's true.
So many things,
It was a compliment, by the way. I wasn't ribbing you at all. It's a compliment. I worked in the spirits industry for a long time. I worked in the Scotch whiskey industry, and I know very little about wine. But I know when I like one and I know when I don't. So I guess as long as I know that much.
That's all that matters.
That's all you need.
Right. Well, look, guys, it's been a pleasure. We know you're busy. And we know it takes a little time to come on here, so we really thank you for taking the time and coming on. And before we leave, again, just let people know, obviously, the website, wine.com, which, by the way, it's the best name to have. That's like having it's like having blue.com, white.com, cigars.com, whiskey.
Yeah, It's really, really good.
It's really good.
Really, really good.
Yeah, but outside of that, obviously, people go to wine.com, get the wines. But if they want to get a hold of you and ask you any questions, maybe a little more involved, how would they get a hold of you? Do you guys have social media? What social media do you have?
For me, you can usually find me at MA Victor Pinho on any of the social media platforms. So I was able to squat on all of those names, thankfully, at once, or marketwine.com.
Cool.
Yep. And I'm Alex at wine.com. So super simple.
Yeah, and do you guys have Instagram and all of that stuff? Facebook?
Yeah.
And that's at wine.com?
It's just for me, it's just the MA Victor Pinho, and you'll see a lot of wine and a lot of food on there. So if that's what you're into,
we'll know we're at the right place.
Yeah,
you see that.
And two large cats. That's the extent of my content.
Hey, Kareem, just remind our viewers how they can get a hold of you, and you've already plugged your book. Really subtle. It was good, by the way, because you were saying something really important, but you managed to plug your book at the same time. I was really impressed.
Tactful.
Yeah, tactful. That's it. Yeah.
For any thought leadership in the realm of supply chain, it's just KareemKafouri.com, and all the social media handles with my first and last name. And for any global supply chain solutions, it's theatlasnetwork.com, which is the company. So that's it.
And we'll just round it out with my little plug. And my new season of Leave No Trace TV comes out on Amazon Prime on 7th of July, I believe. So go watch that. Go watch season 1 now. It's already on there. Amazon Prime, Leave No Trace TV. Big thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching and listening. Just a reminder that each week we'll have a very special guest on to continue our conversation in the fascinating world of the global supply chain. And don't forget to follow our LinkedIn and YouTube pages at the Supply and Demand Show. Thanks, guys. See you soon.